Here is the church. Here is the steeple. Open the doors. We are the people.
I can reach any goal today. I can do what I want. I can be what I want to be.
Good evening. We're going to ask for the lights to be up so we can see everybody out there. Was that for Hari or Bell?
Oh, that was for Bell.
Hi. Yeah, exactly. My name's Carlin Crowley. I'm the director of the Cassandra Voss Center and professor of English and Women's and Gender Studies at St. Norbert. And I want to start by giving a round of applause for our spin doctor, Dr. Amy Ongiri. Yeah. Dr. Ongiri, otherwise known as DJ Afrikit, is the Jill Beck Director of Film Studies and Associate Professor of Film Studies at Lawrence University. And I'm guessing there's some Laurentians in the house tonight. Is that right? Yeah, we got some? All right. So welcome to the concluding event of our year-long theme, Delight in the Fight, Disarming Injustice with Humor and Joy. This year, the Cassandra Voss Center has hosted 28 separate speakers and performers, over 3,700 attendees. We talked with folks from an anti-violence double Dutch team, all the way to a comedian from Saturday Night Live. We were featured on Today's Show's website for our work with the Mulville Library on the Human Library, and Ms. Magazine and Inside Higher Ed for our scholarship on identity. And I'm Anna Zarnik-Niemeyer, and I'm the Assistant Director and Chief of Staff at the St. Norbert College Cassandra Voss Center and an alum at the college. We wanted to share with you the core values of the Cassandra Voss Center. If you've been at our programs, you know that we do this each time before introducing bell hooks and Hari Kondabolu. So 4 core values of the Cassandra Voss Center. First, we are scholarship-driven, meaning that all of our programs are grounded in the field of women's and gender studies and identity studies. We are welcoming of all people, both into the building and the space of the Cassandra Voss Center and also around the table into the conversation. We are innovative, meaning our programs are meant to delight and intrigue and be cutting edge. And finally, we are fun. We believe that delight resists tyranny. And when there's joy in the conversation, people want to be in the conversation, which you'll hear tonight in its final event of Delight in the Fight. So at the entrance, you received a couple things, a pencil and a feedback form. And that's also your raffle ticket to be entered in a raffle for a signed Bell Hooks book. And also because it's Delight in the Fight, you'll get a joke fried egg with a cockroach on it. So you'll get a signed book and a cockroach egg. That's for later. Aside from that, we have some free Bell Hooks buttons if you join us at the Friends of the Cassandra Voss Center table, along with brochures about our events. And also a note about the residency in general. We'll be live streaming 2 events tonight and tomorrow night. So we want to give a shout out to those of you out. We know that people have told us that they're coming in from they're streaming in from across the world tonight, joining us here tonight. Actually, when Hari Kondabolu posted on his page, we got 150,000 views of the page. So we have a wealth of people that are watching in live tonight. We're also encourage you to take pictures, not with flash, and we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, SNCCVC, and use the hashtag SNCBellHooks16. If you are interested in donating to the residency, you can go online and do that. So around you, you'll see staff in both Bell Hooks t-shirts and these red Cassandra Voss Center t-shirts. They're here to help you. I want to give a shout out to our staff tonight who have worked so hard to make this event a reality. Also a shout out goes to Humana Insurance and the St. Norbert College Colleen Chair of Theology and Philosophy, our 2 great sponsors without whom this event could not happen. I know we have folks from Humana here tonight and also the Colleen Chair. So what's the order of events tonight? We will get to hear from these incredible people for a little under an hour until 8 o'clock, and then we get to have 20 minutes of Q&A. There'll be people posted here and on the other side with microphones so you can come up and ask your question. And both of them have been generous enough to agree to do a book signing and an album signing on stage. So you can buy those things out there, and then they'll be up here, and we'll start over there, line up over there, and come around stage. Just so that you know, the Cassandra Voss Center, if you haven't been to the space, is open until 10 p.m. tonight. If you want to walk across the street, you're welcome to be, as is our core value, you're welcome to come and see the space. Now, to introduce Dr. Bell Hooks.
When Bell Hooks was recently interviewed by Dr. George Yancey for the New York Times, he said, quote, "I've heard you speak many times, and I notice that you do so with a very keen sense of humor. What is the role of humor in your work?" To which Hooks responded, "We cannot have a meaningful revolution without humor. Every time we see the left or any group trying to move forward politically in a radical way, when they're humorless, they fail. Humor is essential to the integrative balance that we need to deal with diversity and difference and the building of community." Anyone who's spent even 5 minutes listening to Bell Hooks knows that she's hilarious. You all know, right? And also brave. Her insight, honest speech, and terrific storytelling make her everyone's social justice talk show host. She needs a contract, right? We get the pleasure of tuning in live tonight. She's not yet syndicated, to hear her in conversation with wit and wisdom. Honored as a leading public intellectual by the Atlantic Monthly, as well as one of Utne Reader's 100 Visionaries who could change your life. She's changed many lives in this room, I'm sure already. Hooks is a captivating speaker who's authored 40 books, including 5 children's books. Hooks began her first book when she was 19. It went on to be named one of the 20 most influential women's books of the last 20 years by Publishers Weekly. Bell Hooks has commented for 40 years on issues of social justice, ranging from critiques of sexism, racism, homophobia, and classism, to providing pop cultural analysis and illuminating how education can be transformative. The creative interdisciplinary scholarship of Bell Hooks has had an immense impact on branches of learning across the spectrum, affecting everyone, everything, and everyone, from sociology, religious studies, and African American studies to education and communications. Dr. Maya Angelou said, "Each offering from Bell Hooks is a major event." Hooks earned her bachelor's degree from Stanford University, her master's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and her PhD at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Her teaching career began in 1976 at the University of Southern California. She has since held positions at Yale, Oberlin, and the City College in New York. Currently, she is Distinguished Professor in Residence in Appalachian Studies at Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. In 2014, the Bell Hooks Institute at Berea College opened. The motto of the institute is teach, remember, explore, celebrate, or trek. Some of the programming that Hooks has already created at the institute includes conversations with Cornel West, just last week, Laverne Cox, Gloria Steinem, and Beverly Guy-Sheftal, to name a few. It is an honor for the Cassandra Voss Center to be a sister center to the Bell Hooks Institute, and for us to have Hooks return for this 3rd visit to St. Norbert College. And yes, in case anyone is wondering, this trip she's already been thrifting several times, eaten Cerrugi's chocolates, and hit her favorite De Pere spots, if only we could find a house for her. And now to introduce Hari Kondabolu.
Before I tell you more about Hari Kondabolu, we have a clip to show you, a short clip to give you some context for Hari's comedy. And this is from David Letterman in 2014. Let's have a look together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I grew up in Queens, New York, and whenever I fly home, my father will still pick me up at the airport, which is really sweet of him. And this happened a couple of years ago. I land at LaGuardia Airport, I get my bags, I'm walking towards the car, when this lady I'd never seen before runs in front of me, gets into the back of our car. Now that, of course, is strange, because that's never supposed to happen. So I opened the door, I said, "Excuse me, miss." Before I finish, she cuts me off. She says, "Look, I'm sorry, but I got here first. Maybe you should walk a little faster." At this point, it becomes clear that she thinks she's in a cab and my father is a cab driver. Because apparently she's so racist, she looks at the color of the driver before looking at the color of the car. Well, clearly, Clearly, he has the markings of the servant class. Drive me. About 5 seconds after I realized what happened, she realized what happened, and I know she realized what happened because she scooted over to the left-hand passenger seat, opened the door, and started running. And I was frustrated not only with the situation, but with my reaction to it. I blew an amazing opportunity because what I should have done is I should have opened that door and I should have said, "Excuse me, miss, you want to split this cab?" Because if we split that cab, all sorts of fascinating possibilities could occur. Fascinating questions, right? Questions like, is it kidnapping if we take her where she wanted to go? Is it ransom if she pays a reasonable fare for such a trip? I hate how immigrants are talked about in this country. I was watching CNN, which was my mistake, and they were interviewing this woman in Arizona who's against immigration, right? And she said, "Look, we're just trying to bring this country back to the way it used to be." The way it used to be. Lady, you're in Arizona. It used to be Mexico. I don't get it. I don't get all the anti-immigrant sentiment in this country, because this is a country that says it's the greatest country in the world. We're the best. We're number one. Then we get upset when people actually show up. But when you advertise something, sometimes people buy it. That's how it works. I hate intolerance. I don't know why we're talking about tolerance to begin with. It's 2014. We should be at acceptance and love. What's this tolerance business? Like, what do you tolerate? Back pain? I've been tolerating back pain and the gay Latino at work. It's a low bar for humanity, is all I'm saying. But the country's changing and people are freaking out about it. And I know they're freaking out because I keep hearing about the year 2042 on the news. For those of you who don't know, 2042, according to census figures, is the year when white people will be the minority in this country. They'll be 49%, and white people are freaking out about it. Don't freak out, white people. You were the minority when you came to this country. Things seem to have worked out for you. But here's the bigger point. Here's the more important point. 49% white doesn't make you the minority. That's not how math works. 49% white is only the minority if you think the other 51% is exactly the same. Well, it's 49% white people and 51% you people. That's the only way that works. Because that 51% is not a united front. And it's easy to figure this out. Just ask a black guy and a Korean guy what happens when the black guy walks into the Korean guy's store. That interaction might not be pleasant. It might not be like, "Hey, teammate. How's it going, teammate? Pretty excited, you? 2042, am I right?" That's probably not what's happening there. There's some historic tension. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Hari, you're saying that 51% is not exactly the same, but you're assuming that all white people are the same. Yes. No. I'm joking, right? Because white isn't a thing. Race isn't a thing. It's a social construct. It's a way to divide us. It's not real. And for the minorities in this room, you know this is true, right? Because when you ask your white friends what their cultural heritage is, they never just say white. They give you a math equation. I'm a third German, and a fourth Irish, and 1/16th Welsh, and 1/40th Native American for college applications. Damn, Steve, all these years I thought you were just white. Thank you very much.
So if you were to encounter Hari Kondabolu with your headlines and celebrity shout-outs, this is what you might hear. According to New York Times, Hari Kondabolu is one of the most exciting political comics in stand-up today, end quote. According to NPR, National Public Radio, quote, Hari Kondabolu is a brainy comedian who cuts through the polite talk about race and gender. According to comedian Chris Rock, quote, of all the comics named Hari Kondabolu is the best. And finally, according to writer and CNN docuseries host W. Kamau Bell, quote, Hari Kondabolu is the comedy equivalent of a punk rock concert that breaks out at a human rights rally. Now that's a rally I know we'd all want to be at. Hari Kondabolu is a Brooklyn-based, Queens-raised comic who is all of the things that people say about him. He has been featured on David Letterman, Conan, John Oliver, Jimmy Kimmel, and NPR's Terry Gross. He even has a page in this feminist coloring book called Badass Feminist Coloring Book. It's true. Kondabolu has been featured at HBO Comedy Central, on HBO, Comedy Central, South by Southwest, Sasquatch, Aspen Ideas Festival, and others. He's got academic chops as well. Kondabolu was recently New York University APA Institute's artist in residence. He earned his BA in comparative politics from Bowdoin College. A former immigrant rights organizer in Seattle, Kondabolu also earned a master's degree in human rights from the London School of Economics. Also, it should be noted that Hari Kondabolu is a bona fide Bell Hooks MVP. In a 2013 interview with the South Asian American Digital Archive, Kondabolu discusses a comic bit where he references Bell Hooks. The interviewer asks, has Bell Hooks chimed in at all? Kondabolu says, no, Bell Hooks hasn't chimed in yet. I have another joke that I've been doing that has Bell Hooks in it, where I name a fictional daughter Bell Hooks Kondabolu. It should be noted that I've never met Bell Hooks yet, but I'd very much like to. So you can imagine when the Cassandra Voss Center heard this, we knew it was meant to be. In another interview online, feminist publication Feministing had an interview with Kondabolu where he was asked the question everyone secretly wants to be asked. The interviewer says, you're going to a desert island and you get to take one food, one drink, and one feminist. What do you pick? Kondabolu replied, food's definitely pizza. I've lived off pizza for a month. My drink would be Moscato. The feminist would be Bell Hooks. Wait, excuse me. We're like doing a big talk here with Bell Hooks and Hari Kondabolu.
I have a pizza for Bell Hooks and Hari Kondabolu and also a Moscato.
The Moscato's for later. The pizza is for whatever you like. There's actual pizza in there. Here's to making everyone's feminist dreams come true, including Hari Kondabolu. So, please join us in welcoming Bell Hooks and Hari Kondabolu.
Can we have the lights up again? Thank you. Welcome. Of course, when we're married, the question is, will I call myself Bell Hooks Kondabolu? Or will I stay Bell Hooks? We've been having great conversation all day. And one thing that came to my mind is growing up in a dysfunctional family. I feel like one of the things that kept us together and saved us was humor. That there was always joking, there was always laughter. So I think of laughter as an intervention, laughter as leaving the door open for healing. And we're particularly excited, all of us, here at St. Norbert's, you know I claim St. Norbert's as my place, to have Hari with us.
Thank you, Belle. It means the world to me, obviously. I didn't know they were going to read those interviews that I had given many years ago.
Is that like saying he's over Bell Hooks?
I'm not saying... I'm just trying not to come off as a fan, but it's very clear that I am. So this is like the ultimate fan journey, right? To actually share a stage with you. So thank you.
So we wanted to start with childhood because I really wanted to hear, as I'm sure you do, how this guy began to develop his political critical consciousness and then how he decided to put that together with comedy.
Well, I think comedy came first, definitely. My mother is extremely funny. My father is unintentionally very funny. And my mom has always dealt with a lot of things, her own pain, through comedy, whether it was leaving India, where she was a doctor, leaving her family behind, having to give everything up to raise 2 kids. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think she suffered through. So that seems weird. Raising us wasn't suffering, she would argue. At least she wouldn't say it publicly. But certainly, like, she always used humor. Me and my brother, as a result, did as well. And when I started doing comedy, it certainly wasn't for noble reasons. Like, I was 16 or 17, didn't know how to play the guitar, had to do something. My poetry was terrible. I'm like, well, maybe girls will like me if I tell jokes on stage. And it proved ineffective, but at the same time, I knew, I was obsessed with it. The first time I saw Margaret Cho on television, I knew I wanted to do stand-up. And that was the big moment for me, was seeing Margaret. And then I went to college, went to Bowdoin College. I grew up in Queens, New York, went to college in Maine, which is very different from Queens, New York, and not as diverse, of course. And I think that was hard, and so I started doing stand-up. A lot of my early stuff was not stuff I'm particularly proud of. It was very...
Give us an example.
Oh, it was a lot of impressions of my parents and the use of stereotypes unironically, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I would find now, like, I would, probably racist and sexist and stuff that I, but when you watch comedy, especially as a 16 or 17-year-old, especially at that time, I feel like a 16 and 17-year-olds now are much further along. We did not have Tumblr at the time. Which is the only way information can be shared, of course. And so I certainly tried, mimicked what I saw on television, and I just assumed that's the way to do it. And post 9/11, I became a political being. I really started thinking about the world. I thought about the hate crimes that were happening in my community and all over the country. I started thinking about why we were at war. I started questioning U.S. foreign policy. A lot of things came together, and I'm on stage talking about my parents having funny accents. Like, there was this dissonance. And then I saw Paul Mooney doing stand-up when I was, I think, 19 or 20. And the way Paul just so aggressively talked about race and had a crowd that was mostly people of color, mostly black, and there were white people who would walk out of his shows, and he did not care because he was going to talk about what he wanted to talk about. And then it was the first time I saw the importance of making people uncomfortable and still being able to make them laugh, and just the impact of that. So, I mean, to me, that was my journey to get to where I started now, like where I am now. Yeah.
That's my motto, too. Unbought and unbossed. And I got that from Shirley Chisholm. I don't have to care what people think. I have to provoke people to think. And that's been the excitement of Bell Hook's work for me, and it's also the excitement of Hari's comedy for me. So I want him to share with us. I mean, it's no easy task to be politically progressive with comedy. I mean, think about how much comedy has been so sexist, so misogynist, so racist, so patriarchal, male-centered. And then here's Hari. He comes along with a joke called the feminist dick. I want to tell people that joke so they can kind of get a sense of how you...
My feminist dick joke?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. Put your hands over Hazel's ears.
Is it okay if I stand up if I'm going to tell the joke?
Oh, yes.
Just because that's usually how I do it. Never in my wildest dreams did I assume I would tell this joke with bell hooks right next to me. Oh, boy. One second you're writing a joke in the basement of a sports club, and then all of a sudden, here you go. All right, sports part. Okay, so we've never had a female president, never had a woman president, and the reason for that obviously is sexism, because we have men in this country that are so sexist that they say things like, well, we can't elect a woman because you know what's going to happen if we elect a woman, right? Once a month, she's going to have her period and have PMS and go crazy. She'll ruin the country. Like, there are men who actually believe that, right? You know, that a woman, God, I forgot my own joke that I tell. I've done this on television. What is it? Oh, that's right. Yeah. that a woman, because of her biology, has her judgment impaired. Well, I'm a man who happens to have a penis and testicles. My judgment is impaired every 5 to 7 minutes. I'll be honest with you, I wake up some mornings with my judgment impaired. And that joke answers the question, Hari Kondabolu, can you write a feminist dick joke? So that's basically what the joke is. And it was funny because that joke originally was basically that joke, except without the middle where I stuttered and got confused. And I had a fan who was a trans man, question me on it in a polite way, but very much like the idea was that he felt excluded by how I talked about gender. And it was hard because I know that talking about sexism in public in the basement of a sports bar, I think talking about trans stuff, especially a few years ago, I wasn't going to get to people, and this was a step, I thought, to still be funny. But the point was well taken. It is the idea that I just stopped there, and that was the joke, and I made gender this very clear binary, which I don't necessarily agree with either. So I ended up writing a second part to that joke, which is on the album, something that calls myself out on it. But it is tricky sometimes where you have a voice and you have your point of view and you want to share it with the world, but at the same time, it has to be made clear to people where you're coming from. The ideas have to be clear to people, and ultimately, I have to make them laugh. The goal of stand-up to me is not to be righteous, it's to be funny. And the righteous part is the part that I want to be as a human being, and I want my art to reflect who I am. However, if I'm unable to make that funny for people because it's too far out of their range, and I'm unable to bridge that gap quickly enough to make the joke work, you have to sacrifice sometimes some of the righteousness for art. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Bell Hooks?
Well, I didn't think we were leading up to you have to sacrifice some of the righteousness for art, because it's really about integrity. And integrity is when there is congruence in what you think, say, and do. And part of what fascinates me about Hari's work is the striving to have integrity of perspective and vision, even as you make people laugh. Because I think that he asked me about myself and comedians, and I said, I feel like I've had this tension between especially a lot of black male comedians who are sexist and misogynist, who also make me laugh. But it's that tension between, how do you support someone who is expressing very anti-black female sentiments? As one of his sort of figures that inspires him, Chris Rock. I used to like Chris Rock a lot, but the more I heard his anti-black woman stance in his humor, I just wasn't interested anymore. So that's an interesting question about, do you feel like people will maintain their passion and interest in you?
You mean when I eventually screw up?
I didn't mean that. I meant, do you think that audiences are growing for work that is decolonized? And when I say decolonized, I mean work that pushes against imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, as opposed to humor that simply revalidates the culture of domination.
I think there's a lot of people, I do think there is a taste for what I do, and there are other comics who are doing similar kinds of work, absolutely. But I think, it's possible to like both. And I think it's really hard, because I certainly think that you see my stand-up show and you might laugh a lot and you appreciate, and people will say things like, I thought a lot on the ride home and stuff like that. Or you might watch somebody else who you might objectively see as far more oppressive, but you laughed significantly harder than what you heard me say. And I think those two things are possible, and again, feel dissonant, but are certainly possible. So I do think there is an audience for what we're doing. I think there's a generation now that really excites me. I think they know more than I did when I was that age. They care about the work. They read your work at a much earlier age and are shaped by it, and that certainly helps me, because when I talk about certain things, about intersections, about racism, about sexism, about homophobia, it's not a shock to them. It's to them, that's what they're fighting for as well. And so we're closer than we were, but I don't think it's like, I certainly think that like we're at a place where both are coexisting and you can still like both just as much.
I'm not sure I agree with that. Can you like both just as much? Because it seems to me that one of the dilemmas we have faced as women and men who advocate feminism is the more you grow in awareness about patriarchy, the more a lot of stuff isn't funny anymore. The same with race. Things that you could maybe just turn your head away from, they're not funny to turn your head away from anymore. So I think at some point you do have to choose, Hari.
Right. I mean, but I think there is the concept of the problematic fave, right? The idea that you can love something and acknowledge how hard it is. And you're right, there is a degree of wincing or looking away or actively ignoring. And there's the idea of, can't we just enjoy anything? And we can, because it's embedded in the stuff. But I feel like it's kind of desperate in a way, like you just want to be able to enjoy something without getting hurt while you watch it constantly. And I feel like it's hard to avoid when you're a conscious, thoughtful, sensitive person. But there's, I feel like there are times I certainly, like, Fife died recently. I was listening to a bunch of Tribe songs, and I love Tribe. And that's local music to me. That's Queen's music. And I was hearing Tribe, and it's incredible. And at the same time, there's a bunch of stuff in there. Hearing it as an adult, I'm like, oh God, that's sexist. Not even slightly, like clearly. And how do I still enjoy this? And do I dismiss it completely? And it triggers all these positive memories. How do I make sense of that? I'm aware of it, but I can't just throw it out.
Well, it's interesting because I think that many of us as females find sexism is so normalized, whereas people of color, black, brown, whatever, when we hear a racist joke or racism spoken not as a joke, we really feel assaulted in our sensibilities. But sexism is such a woven into the fabric of our daily lives that I think it's harder for people to resist. I had an experience recently where I had my door opened in my little condo, and this big white man came through the door and he shut it. And I can share with you that I was afraid, because patriarchy makes me afraid. But I didn't say anything. I didn't say, sir, would you please open my door again? I just allowed him to come in and sit down. And I was thinking, Bell Hooks, with all the training you've had in feminist thinking and practice, in that actual experiential moment, I didn't respond. The little sexist girl in me responded. And that's, I think, why it's so important to have alternative voices and to not be alone. Because one of the things I was thinking about myself as a dissenting black woman, Hari had raised the question, do I care what white people think? And I, of course, was saying to him, because I was raised in the dysfunctional family where I was abused, and I had to stand against my parents, I remember even thinking then that if I have to live in a world where I have to stand against my parents, I will have to stand against anybody. I remember my mom, as she's giving me one of those brutal whippings, saying, you're mine, and I'll do with you what I want. And me saying, oh, no, I don't have a mother. And here's the irony of domination. She was really hurt that I said I don't have a mother, but she wasn't at all disturbed by her saying, you're mine and I'll kill you if I want to. So I think that it's so hard to imagine different worlds. And rather than imagining a world where I come to terms with sexist, racist, crazy humor, homophobic humor, I'd like to think about what does it mean to live in a world where we have humor that doesn't have that, where we have different ways of being funny and laughing together.
I wouldn't say that I've come to terms with it.
That's because you're just a baby.
I mean, I certainly, like, I'm in comedy clubs and I perform, with my colleagues, and certainly I'll hear things I find repulsive in those spaces. which it's a strange thing. I'm like, oh, that was a clever use of language, and well, what a turn. Like, you appreciate the mechanics of a joke while also being like, why are you using your superpowers for evil? And it is strange for me because it's like, I see what I see and I don't like, but at the same time, I remember that person, or maybe someone who was doing this style of comedy from 10 years ago, saying things that were far more repulsive. Now, I don't think I'm settling for this, but I at least see it as like we're moving really slowly, or maybe a lot quicker than maybe we would have in another 10-year stretch. But we're certainly like, I see change, and I see that, but it's hard to,
interesting that when we go against the grain, we are deemed political humor.
Yeah.
But the nasty misogynist stuff isn't deemed political humor. No. So we constantly operate in this world of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, where the normalized aggression is not seen as political. So maybe part of what has to happen is we have to do more of that education for critical consciousness that helps people to see that this is political. That when people say incredibly sexist, misogynist things about Hillary Clinton, it is political. I mean, I tell people, I'm personally, as I said, at St. Norbert College with Gloria Steinem, when I was here last, and I was asked my thoughts about Hillary Clinton, I said she embodies the very best of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't vote for her. It depends on the context. But I have actually been stunned by the level of misogyny in which people have attacked her. Because it's one thing to attack someone because of their political standpoints that you don't agree with. But a lot of the attacking of Hillary Clinton has to do with that misogynistic fear of there being a woman president. And it makes me think, as a militant feminist advocate, what happened that there's such rage? Because it's almost like a kind of covert anti-feminist rage that is not articulated as much in our society, but it's still there. And that's what's shown me that this patriarchal rage against women is still very much the norm in our society. So write as many feminist dick jokes as you can to intervene on this.
I just also wanted to speak to what you were saying earlier with regards to it's all political. Whatever choice you make is political. How you're contributing to society with the language you use and the art that you create is political. But I would also say, like, I do hate being branded political, or as a social justice comedian, or an activist comedian, or whatever label people want to put on for the sake of branding, because these aren't political observations to me. They're just observations. Like, I see these things pretty quickly. And so why is someone talking about their dog or their day at work any more of an observation than me talking about racism or systemic oppression? Like, I feel it, I see it. Like, we have these double lenses, and to me, it's not particularly hard to see it. And so, I hate the fact that it gets niched as a thing, because ultimately, my goal is for this work to be as mainstream as possible, because I believe that the stuff that I'm talking about should be mainstream.
But that's the thing about any of the work we do within this capitalist machinery, that it can be sort of branded. And branding can be a way of silencing. Like, one of the frustrations I feel is I have a wide range of interests. And one of the most exciting aspects of the Bell Hooks Institute for me is that it has offered me a space to articulate my interest in Buddhism. And I don't have to have somebody say, I have published a little book, I think it's out here somewhere where you can see it, called In the Temple of Love, the Female Buddha. But when I tried to talk to a mainstream press about it, they said, well, Belle, people are used to you talking about race and gender, and we just don't think there's an audience for you talking about Buddhism or writing abstract poems. And I think that that's one of the things about Parker and I will talk about tomorrow, is the notion of wholeness. I want to be whole. I don't want to be trapped by race or gender or class, because I think I am more than all of that. I am, transcendent at the same time that I think those specific parts of my identity are important. And it's very hard to project that when you're always coming up against a dominant culture that wants to fix you in your brand, but fix you in a way that silences you, not in a way that opens up the space, that allows you to speak in various voices and in various dreams. It's like when I tell people I write children's books, and people will just act like, oh, I didn't know that about you. Or it's like Hyperion saying to me, well, Belle, your books aren't selling that much. We're not going to reprint them. Whereas I think that my children's books are very similar to your comedy in the sense that, like B-Boy Buzz, which is my favorite, they create an intervention in the minds of children. And we could call it political or radical or whatever, but should it be radical to write a book like Happy to be Nappy that invites black girls with all kind of hair texture to love themselves? Girl pie hair smells clean and sweet. It's soft like cotton, flower petal, billowy soft. And then I meet some little black girl and she says, you said our hair is like flower petals. And she burst into laughter. And I think about that power of imaging and words to shape our lives, to shape everything that we do and say, those imprints. And this is my reason. We're going to talk some about vocation and calling, because Hari feels very called to comedy. Obviously, I felt called to the critique of the world that we're in. But how do I exist so that I can be whole in that world? So I can continue to write about all the things that interest me, not just race, class, gender. And why is it that we like someone better who doesn't talk about those things?
Yeah. If you're asking why I'm not more successful, I think about that every day, Belle.
Now, did I suggest anything about Hari? Actually, Hari, I feel I exist. I've been reading all 9 or 10 or however many he has Parker Palmer books. It's like I'm in bed with God and Parker Palmer every morning. Because after I do my spiritual meditation and everything over these past weeks, I've been reading Parker Palmer. And one of his favorite words is paradox. Because I feel it's a sign of how culture has changed that bell hooks can even be here, that I can have the readership that I have. And I feel incredibly grateful, especially to those of you who are students. At many places, it's students who have pushed for my work to be read. So on one hand, I feel like it's amazing. On the other hand, I feel like, why can't my children's books stay in print? Why can't they give the push that insanely sexist man who wrote Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus? Is it the pigeon? Which, again, we're back to, I really like that book, but I see that certain things get pushed. Like the way, if you were to go back and you were doing a study of Harry Potter, and you would find, that the white man who first read it, and then they pushed it on Time magazine or one of those magazines, and you see that it's not just that it's so great that everybody likes it, it's also that everybody has been told that they should like it. Contrast my Happy to be Nappy with that awful book, Nappy Hair, which of course sold rings around Happy to be Nappy. But the heart of that book was the little black girl is shamed every day of her life about her hair. And then all of a sudden at the end of the book, she's twirling with love. And I was like, there is no kid that is shamed about their physical appearance every day of their life that's going to suddenly be self-loving. So but you know who people kept saying, well, this is a wonderful book. Adults really like that book. I never heard from children like, oh, I think this is a great book. Because I think children know intuitively and experientially when somebody is saying something really mean about you and it doesn't make you feel good. So actually, I think you're very successful, and I think I'm very successful. But I think that what's amazing is no matter how successful I am, no matter how many tweets are gotten, when I say something that people think is out of line, or when I go to publishers who say, sorry, bell hooks, you're just not as interesting as you used to be. We liked you better when you were such a bitch and so angry. And now you're writing about love. And so that is, to me, I'm really excited by self-determination. I'm very excited about the Bell Hooks Institute. And I must say that when I thought of my sister, I have 5 sisters, and one died unexpectedly. And her death, about 2 years ago, I guess, made me think a lot about my own legacy, my papers, the artifacts of my childhood. And I thought, well, what should I do? And so I had the fancy white schools that were trying to buy my papers, the fancy white schools that nobody can get to but people with money. And I thought about how when people go into fancy libraries to look at papers and things, they have to show ID, they have to go through the metal detector, and that's not what I wanted for Bell Hooks' work. So I thought, well, I should just open a center. And I have to say, and I told Hari this, that both black and white people were very negative about it. A really close black woman friend who runs a women's center said to me, Belle, you don't know what the hell you're doing. You don't even need to do this. A really famous black man told me, look, you only think you want everyday people touching your shit. You don't. You should sell your papers to the highest bidder. So that's an interesting paradox, which is Parker's favorite word, that we live within, because on one hand, we can, I can have white colleges trying to buy my papers. But on the other hand, the vision that I have of educating beyond the academy, of having everyday people be able to engage with high-powered thinkers. I mean, Cornell just came to our little town of 12,000, and we're in the hotel, and there is a black man that many have seen as kind of a stereotype, who's worked as a bellman probably for 30 years or more. So I call Mr. Fred over and I say, I want to introduce you to Cornell West. And he looks at Cornell with such incredible love and adoration. And he says, I have been waiting years for this moment. And they have their little one-on-one, face-to-face conversation. And my heart was so lifted up because I thought, this is what I wanted. Not for other academics to come out and chat with Cornell, but for a person who is living their life, and maybe they heard something from Cornell, maybe they read, to have an opportunity to talk with him.
How much do you think the internet has helped in terms of being your fuller self and finding other people who appreciate all the different things that you do?
Well, many of you know that I don't use the internet myself, but all of a sudden now I have a presence on social media. Please buy those votive candles that say St. Bill. But until I did the new school conversation with Melissa Harris Perry, where I remember when they came out and they said, do you mind if we live stream? I was like, oh, I'll sign the form, but what is live streaming? And when we did that conversation, we had 300,000 hits. And it really shocked me. And I thought, wow, the average published book in our nation sells maybe 2,000 copies. And so I was like, wow, you mean this is what the internet can do? And as many of you know, I've become buddies with Emma Watson. And Emma has like 20 million followers. And I'm like, wow. And so I've come to see what a powerful vehicle social media is, but I also see how it can be a silencing mechanism. But you use it more, so talk about it.
Well, I'd like to know why you think it's a silencing mechanism, because as somebody who's like in the world, it's harder, I think, to see certain things just because, like, my head right now is thinking, I can't wait to post a picture with me and Belle. And I'm like, I'm sitting with you right now. You are next to me. We are talking. So, how do you...
That is really sick, Hari.
It's sick. It's sick. I didn't think I was a millennial. I'm too old to be a millennial at 33, but that kind of thought, yeah, I'm a millennial. That's sick. How do you see it as silencing? Because I've certainly had
I think it's silencing on levels that, one, people, like the comment I made about Beyonce, that was taken out of context. The recent comment about Hillary Clinton that I had made that was taken out of context. And then people develop incredible anger and hatred towards you over something that they haven't even gotten right. And that's the power of the negative power of social media. And the question is, Parker writes about this because I think he's almost 10 years older than me, about how he too kind of shunned it for a while, and then he began to see its positive power. And of course, like everything, it's how you use it. It's what you do with it. But it's really hard. I think women especially have experienced how social media can be used against us. Certainly, if you think about the greater proliferation in our society of child pornography, how much social media has played a role in making that possible. So it's really hard.
I would also suggest, if you haven't read her work, my friend Lindy West writes a lot about that and had a This American Life about that idea too, just what she deals with as a woman who is a feminist, is very critical of the world, and she talks about the number of rape threats she can receive within a day just on Twitter. And so, obviously my experience as a man on this, I say all sorts of things that get people riled up, but no one's ever threatening, people threaten to kill me, but not with the same frequency, I should say. So it's, I certainly see that, but have you ever thought about, what if I tried it for a week? What if I got Twitter for, no, you're looking at me like you're saying.
I have a Twitter account, and it's run by somebody else. They call me and they ask me, what do I want to put on my account? And I tell them, but I would no more know how to access Twitter than the woman in the moon. It's like, I guess because, and again, reading so much Parker Palmer in The Company of Strangers is one of my favorite books. The whole idea of, I was saying, in the old days when you traveled, you would often talk to people, and now everybody's on their phone. Everybody's on some kind of tablet. So the idea of strangers, I guess one of the things that excited me so much about Hari, about talking with Parker Palmer, is that we are such a segregated society, an apartheid-driven society. Not necessarily in the workforce anymore, but certainly in our home lives. But we're also a society where certain people never get to talk with other people. I feel I should be sitting down with the Dalai Lama, okay? But I don't think I'll get to do that in his lifetime. And that's presupposing he's going to die before me. But it seems to me that one of the big important interventions, and I honor St. Norbert's for having me and having Gloria Steinem, is that how do we have conversations we talk all this stuff about diversity and border crossing, but in reality, it's very difficult to talk with people not like yourself. It's very difficult for certain combinations of people never come together. I am publishing these little booklets, of which you can buy the one I did with Cornel West after this talk, but I just am about to publish one, which is a conversation that I did with James Hillman, the Jungian psychoanalyst. He is passed away now, but I remember that the abusive patriarchal man that I lived with was a big James Hillman fan, and he turned me on to James Hillman. But I remember thinking, I was a young woman, and I thought, I'm not really smart enough to grasp James Hillman. I kept reading his different books about the soul and everything, But then finally, when I became one of the Utne Reader 100 Visionaries that can change your life, James was also one of those visionaries. So we met and we said, you know what? We don't get a chance. When does James get a chance to meet a brilliant young black woman feminist in his life? And we decided that we would have conversations, that we would get together. And I'm always aware of how hard it is to cross those boundaries. For us, it was boundaries of age, no eroticism. He was a bit of a womanizer. We didn't have any of that kind of energy between us. He came to Kentucky when he wrote his book on war. We walked around the battlefields of the Civil War in Kentucky. And, you know, this man inspired me, my work, my life, my book. My last book, Moving Beyond Race, is dedicated to him. But we were very fortunate to be able to talk to one another.
When you talked, what did you talk about? What was the...
Well, we talked about the whole question of genius. We talked a lot because he wrote a lot about vocation and calling. James was one of the few people who, I hate it when people say, everybody's a writer. Everybody's an artist. I don't believe that, even though I just read Liz Gilbert's book, Big Magic. That's Liz Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love, a book that I just thought was ridiculous. But goes to show what I know, you know, which sold millions and millions. I mean, are all of you like me? Whenever people are buying a book that sells millions and millions, I think I have to rush out and read it. Of course, with Liz Gilbert, I just had to rush to the Salvation Army, where many copies were there for 50 cents. And then I borrowed the book, Big Magic. You know, and black women sometimes have white girl envy, like, do I really need to know that Liz washed out her panties in some third world countries? And she'd never done that before. That was really deep. I wonder someday if we as people of color will write about our racialized envy. Because sometimes I have racialized envy for things that white people can do, like write experimental work. I don't know how many of you have read Maggie Nelson, but she's like the hot ticket right now. But I don't think if she was a black female that she would have been able to get anybody to publish a memoir like Argonauts or Blue X. And I don't know, how do we begin to break those silencing codes? I remember years ago, I went to hear the Cuban writer Edmundo Desnoyers speak, and people just kept pounding him with the whole issue of censorship in Cuba. And he said, you have so much censorship in this country, but it's not done overtly. It's done by people saying, well, sorry, Belle, who would read this book? Well, sorry, Belle, your children's books aren't selling enough. And, you know, you want to say, gee, if you pushed my books like you do those by white men, I'm sure they'd sell. But those forms of censorship are harder to talk about. Or, you know, I can be honest, I struggle with Disney in taking the books out of print, because the other thing about covert forms of censorship is you often can't even get an understanding of why. You know, I mean, why is it books of mine that sell still go out of print? Who decides? I mean, publishing is still a very white-dominated business. And more, it's like young white people that are deciding things.
Who read your books and feel like they're guilt-free now.
Are you kidding? These are the young white people who read my books and think, Bell Hooks hates white people. You know, I wish they were reading my book saying, I'm guilt-free.
Right. I mean, I think I find it frustrating, like the diversity conversation in general, I find frustrating, because it ends up being a thing where when a film gets made or someone succeeds, it's because, you know, Hollywood's diversifying. Like, Hollywood's not doing shit. Hollywood knows that, you know, like, this person is going to make the money, that there is a market they didn't see before, and they want to cash in on it. This has nothing to do with doing the right thing or someone giving you an opportunity, because, you know, they just know you will make the money, and it's as simple as that.
Well, for example, those of you who follow Belle, I hated the film 12 Years a Slave. I said, if I don't see another film where a black woman is being raped and beaten as long as I live, I will be just fine. But a film that came out shortly around that time was the film Belle. And that film was so on it about history, about interracial love, about masculinity. I mean, there are scenes in that film that you could just show to people how patriarchy works overtly with racism. And yet, lots of people didn't go see it. Because if you looked at the advertising of the film, it made it seem like, oh, just another tragic mulatto film. Just another tragic mulatto film. So it's interesting to think of forms of advertising as silencing. And that goes back to Hari Kondabolu, how you will be packaged in terms of how people view your work.
Well, I also know that I'm in subtle ways and some not so subtle ways, like pitted against like black comics. So I'm accessible. I'm Indian, and therefore you don't know what to do with me. And I'm on stage yelling about race, but I don't intimidate anybody, so I can get away with it. Like my friend W. Kamau Bell, like, you know, Kamau is a lot sillier on stage. He definitely moves a lot. Black comedian, very tall. And, you know, he tells me there's things that you can do that I can't do, because if I was to yell like that, the audience would be scared. It's a large black man yelling at me. And if you do it, people don't know what to do. They've never seen, like, why is this Indian guy so angry? Like, and why does he look like my professor yelling at me? And it's a very different, like, dynamic. So, you know, I'm also aware part of it is that, like, you know, South Asians in the media, you see an increasing number of them. They're still often in subservient roles, but there's more of them, and I think it's because we're like the safe minority to pick up in mainstream, and I think it reflects a lot of...
Well, we even see that in academia. A lot of schools that are not willing to hire African Americans will hire their South Asian person as the person of color because they feel safer.
And they probably grew up with more South Asians. I mean, that's what a lot of this is. It's like you hire who you know. You hire who you're friends with. You hire who you're comfortable with. And you can talk a lot of game about diversity and the importance of, but if there's a position available in whatever industry you're in and you have a friend who you think can fill it and that friend is obviously white, who's going to get that job? It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to close soon. So since I love that delight in the fight, I would like us to close, both of us, by talking about some of the joys in the work we do. And my biggest joy is what I call when people are working with the work. When somebody comes up to me and they say, you know, this book helped change my life, and this is how. That's my feeling of success. More than the money people are willing to pay me to speak or stuff like that. It's the idea that your work has really done what you wanted it to do. And because I feel my life is guided by spiritual beliefs, and I feel like I'm working through divine will for my life, it's so exciting to feel that I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do, to serve and to help people heal and transform. And that's a lot of joy. And I have to say, so much of the time, I think about the Black women writers like Zora Neale Hurston, even Toni Cade Bambara, Black women writers who were not able to know just how much people would love their work or learn from it. And I can't say, I have to give testimony that practically every day of my life, somebody is writing to me about my work. And I was telling Hari about living in New York City and how people put the little trash out. And I'm in my nightgown, it's really late at night, and there's people who put out some albums, and I'm convinced my Nina Simone album that somebody borrowed is in this trash. So I'm like down on my knees, going through the trash, and somebody taps me on the shoulder and they said, "Are you Bell Hooks?" I've read everything. And I mean, that's That's the magic for me. That's the delight in the fight.
That's wonderful. Was there a part of you while it was happening like, I wish I wasn't doing this right now? While they were...
No, thank God. What I think, thank God they didn't have a cell phone.
Bell Hooks' last book didn't sell particularly well. What's going on? There isn't like an academic gossip site, is there?
No.
Okay, well that's an idea for the world.
So tell us about your delight. I have to say, I'm really delighted to be with this guy. I'm really delighted he's single so I can flirt with him. even though he's a little too young.
I'm glad someone's delighted that I'm single. I'm glad. God. Well, this gives me joy. Like, still to this day, when I travel around the world and I'm tired and I'm angry and I'm single, and I think to myself, why is it when I was 16 or 17 years old did I decide this was it? Even if I wanted to deny this was it, my heart kind of knew this was it. It's because I still hear laughter and it's still as intoxicating and I can't stop. And that's one thing. When someone writes me an email when a kid stops me on the street, especially when it's a young person, who's 12, 13, 14, tells me how much my stand-up means to them. Because I remember being 12, 13, 14 and stand-up was my world. And even though I grew up in Queens, New York, in this cosmopolitan place, I was in New York City, stand-up comedians like shared the world. You know, they gave me the world. And so the fact I can give my version of the world to a young person, I mean, that's shocking. And also it's, you know, when a kid says, I've been their favorite comic since the 7th grade, it feels awful. And the final thing, why, you know, I think that is a big reason I keep doing it as a sign of success for me, was health insurance. It was so exciting to finally be able to get health insurance in my late 20s, around the time I turned 30, on a consistent basis. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but
We'd like to hear some jokes about that in the future.
Oh, they're the track, one of the tracks on the album. My healthcare plan is all it's a John. That's right. The Jonathan Swift. These are the reasons I'm on NPR and not on television, because I write jokes about Jonathan Swift and healthcare. But yeah, I mean, I just see so many artists who are doing incredible work, and they have to stop, and not because they're not talented or not because they don't deserve it, but they get sick, and so yes. I mean, that's certainly for me is a blessing.
Well, I think it's a blessing that Hari and Belle can be together. And we want to open it up for questions. Say your name, ask your question. If you go on too long, with loving kindness. Belle will probably be the one.
If we get married, do I have to take your last name?
I think not.
Okay.
Hari Hooks?
It sounds like a folk singer more than a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, say your name, ask a question. I was going to say, wow, is this going to be a night of no questions? Were we that bad?
Maybe they're like awestruck.
Hi. Well, that's loud. I have a question for Hari. First of all, thanks for representing Paul Mooney. Like, I feel like he doesn't get the credit he deserves. But I have to ask you, and being black, I hate when people ask about the only other black person they ever know about, but I wanted to ask you about Aziz Ansari and his level of success. I'm
not bitter.
Huh?
Oh, was that the question? Okay, I thought.
and just really, he seems to have such a wide forum to make a statement, but he rarely does anything political, and I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Well, he's goofy. To me, he's uninteresting. I know you didn't ask me, but I couldn't let you put my man on the spot like that.
Oh, my peers will bring this up. I mean, I first of all, I think there's something political in a South Asian person getting to be a mainstream star and existing. We didn't have anybody other than Apu from The Simpsons for most of my life, so, you know, a cartoon voiced by a white guy. So, I mean, honestly, Aziz is huge, and his success for me has certainly been revolutionary, even if the things he says aren't always that. I think just having a figure growing up as a young person who is South Asian, whether you're South Asian or not, who is funny and successful. And when we were talking about, you know, just the idea of like, you're going to hire people, you know, the idea of this notable South Asian person being an American, very clearly an American, talking about things that are American. I think, you know, for a lot of people, that's their first connection around the country to a South Asian person. And to me, that's success. Same thing with Mindy Kaling. So, you know, I don't mind doing the part where, you know, I talk about these big things that really bother me, and I'm glad that they do what they do. I think I answered that diplomatically.
I was going to say that because I think this is a tense time for people of color when so many individual like black people like Shonda Rhimes and these shows that I think which I think have horrible values, but are making some black people rich and giving lots of black people jobs. You know, what is the ethical dimension to that?
I mean, I think that point is actually a very good point about just giving black people jobs. I mean, I remember I was working on a show, Totally Biased, with W. Kimmel Bell, and that's as many people who watched it, so we've been canceled for a while. It was an incredible show, and I'm really proud of the work we did, but unfortunately, just didn't get the numbers. But there's so many people who worked on that show who are people of color who are still struggling to find work now, and I go to all these other TV sets, it's all white people working. We have people who are experienced to work for a show that was executive produced by Chris Rock, yet they can't get work, and they're waiting for the next person of color to have a show to hire them. So, I mean, certainly to me, I definitely see the frustration of art that you think is not critical, and I agree that I see so much art that's not critical. But to give people work, I mean, that's still, I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a difficult ethical issue, though.
Yeah.
I was just asked to come on Transparent in a cameo role, but I wasn't able to because of my schedule. I just want you to know how famous I am.
Good evening. My name is Supreme. I'm a Milwaukee County Supervisor, the legislative branch of county government in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I have a question for you, Bell Hooks. It's a very difficult question to answer because it's equally as difficult to ask. When, as a black man who loves black women, it's very, thank you. It's very difficult when I look at, you know, black men are oppressed, black women are oppressed, and when we come home and we always have black women who don't view black men as supportive of them as we should be. And at the end of the day, how do we as black men and women coexist and love one another and move forward together and find resources together? And rightfully so, many black women are saying, you black men, you don't love us, you down us, you talk about us, you make us look like whores and everything in the media. It's a difficult question to ask. So how do we get together and move forward?
But it's not difficult. If black men keep embracing patriarchy, they will always have rage and hatred towards women in general and black women in particular. So, I mean, the possibilities for our future are black men standing up and saying, one of the number one things that's oppressing, exploiting, and killing black men is patriarchy, is allegiance to violence. And violence against one another, against black women, is just a part of that. And if we look at the black men who are standing up, George Yancey, we see how those issues dissolve when we are acting with love. I do feel sad in my heart that so many black women have been so wounded and betrayed that they don't want to give black men the positive commentary because their experience hasn't been positive. And yet, I hope for them Because I mean, one of the little goodies of being bell hooks, I even have black men in prison that are writing me saying, "I've made your name a household word around this prison," because they are studying and reading, and it's provoking. And I know how many black women don't get that affirmation. So keep giving us the affirmation. And Thich Nhat Hanh says that pebble that goes in the pond will do a lot. We're going to take maybe 3 more questions and then sign books.
Hi, I'm Maria.
4. Okay.
I'm a student here, and I was wondering how you balance the tension between using humor as as a vehicle to transcend an issue, and humor as a way to ignore the issue.
Short answer, please.
Well, first of all, I don't see humor as I don't go into writing as I'm going to transcend this issue, I'm going to create change with it. I go in with what is my honest point of view about something and then sharing that with the world. So, I mean, I think this is an egomaniacal job as a stand-up comedian. There's nothing more. There's a lot of look at me, I need your love. It's very sad. So you multiply that with, I'm going to change the world with this. I don't think that's the healthiest mindset when you're creating art. So that's the one thing. And in terms of ignoring an issue, I don't ignore issues. I mean, there's certainly things I feel like I have a perspective on, I think are interesting, and I'll write about it. And if I don't, I won't. And if I'm going to talk about something that I don't have personal experiences with, chances are, like, I'm going to be very careful if I choose to talk about it, or I won't because it won't be honest. Thank you. Thank you, Bell Hooks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maria. Came in from Chicago, so I'm very excited to be here with you. So I wanted to talk about something that Bell Hooks had brought up earlier about spiritual meditation. So I think just like in the world, existing as a person of color, as a woman of color, it can be exhausting, whether you're in it, at the academy, outside of it. So I wanted to know if you could share any other, like, whether it's spiritual or like daily practices or rituals that you both do to like get through it.
Well, it's funny, for so many years I didn't talk about my spiritual practice. And then as I heard more from the suffering of my students, and they would say, well, how do you make it? I began to come out of the closet more with the daily life of prayer, meditation, and inspirational reading. I'm at a transition point in my life trying to figure out where do I go from here. For me, inspirational reading is very crucial. I've been reading a book called Discovering God's Will for Your Life. And I start my day with that. In fact, the other day in giving a talk, someone was asking, how do we get beyond racism? And I said, when I wake up in the morning, I don't wake up with bell hooks, black woman, whatever. I wake up with divine love and with how I'm embraced with love. And that is so crucial to giving me strength to make it through the day.
Man, I wish I woke up with divine love.
Well, when Hari gets together with me.
Yes, bell hooks. I mean, it's sad. When I wake up, the first thing I think is, who tweeted at me while I was asleep? Like, that's the sadness of it. And then divine love maybe a couple hours later after coffee.
We are seeing how desperately he needs therapy.
I think, so I pray in the morning after my shower. I have a bunch of Hindu statues, and I will pray. There's no real rhyme or reason of how I do what I do, but for me, it's a way to refocus. My mom wrote a series of different hymns down, and sometimes I'll repeat those. But generally speaking, yeah. I mean, I don't think I those moments help me because it's a moment to myself when I'm not thinking about other people in my life. I'm not thinking about what other people think of me. It's just a moment for me to just be with myself and whoever else might be there. I say might because I don't want to, you don't want to put all our money there. It could be God, it could be Darwin. We don't know, Or it's a Catholic school, it's God.
Okay.
I'm a charlatan, Bell Hooks. I should have let you know.
Hi, my name is Eden. I'm here from the Twin Cities and really nervous. But Bell Hooks, I have a question for you. You talked about that experiential moment you had when you faced sexism, and your little girl came out, I think is what you said, and that stuck with me because that happened to me, and I was like, I thought I'm prepared for moments like this, right? You train, or college teaches you, and this is like your resources and all of that. And I found my little girl coming out, and I found a loss for words. And so I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that, and what advice you may have just as a young Black woman trying to navigate this world.
Well, I think, one, we have to be forgiving of ourselves when we're not perfect. And the other thing is, I think that triggers are very important, especially when people have been abused in any way, and that we have to be more vigilant about those things that trigger us, paying attention to what triggers you. What triggers, if you've been abused as a young person, what triggers you, what gets you going in a negative way, because that's the way you have to learn how to handle it when someone, and it's interesting to me that I'm constantly amazed at how people of color live in the harshness of white supremacy, and yet we constantly let our guard down and are wounded by something someone says. And I think, but this is the world that we're in. Where's your shield? And I think that it's important to have that protective sense. Like, I have a big fear of Western medicine, and when I go to the doctor, I don't go by myself. I take someone else that gives me strength and power. And usually I take my white male friend, Chris. And that's an interesting border crossing because the doctors all panic. You're going to take off your clothes. Is it okay to Chris? And I was like, yeah, Chris is my bud. And again, I often think about how hard it is for us to make a choice for our comfort and well-being, especially, again, as people of color, because the white doctor is such an authority figure in our society, and to question, to have someone as a witness. But we have to do all of those things to be self-caring and self-protective. So we are at an end. Oh, we want you to, yes.
Thank you for coming tonight. Lance Kelly, college instructor at a community college across town here. But just a comment and a question for both of you. You talk about patrilineal, but in our society, a lot of Native culture, matrilineal is very important to for us. And in the Oneida community, which is just right down the road here, very true. I'm proud to say I'm a feminist. I believe in women's rights, and I teach it. And my wife is here, and a very belief that we live by that standard of being a matrilineal. So it's a little different. And having a young daughter, I definitely are trying to promote that. But my question is, comedy, we mentioned that, and humor for us as Native people is very important also for some of the same reasons. But the question is, there's new shows, Blackish is out there, doing some new stuff out there with basically an all-black staff and actors. How do you feel about, they're doing satire, using those stereotypes, but over the top, and kind of, doing all kinds of different modes of thinking for a lot of different people. And I teach this stuff, I use this stuff, and a lot of white students just have a hard time with that show. But I try to tell them it's something new and you're not used to it, talking about white supremacy and white privilege and all that stuff. But how do you feel about the show and what they're doing? Do you see anything going ahead of that?
Well, I think it's innovative. And the question is, always what people do with knowledge or what people do with an intervention. Because an intervention can, I always say to people, just because you represent something doesn't mean that it changes. You have to see what are people going to do with what they're seeing? How does it affect them in the everydayness of their life?
I think there's a lot of white people in this country that aren't used to being talked about publicly on television. So when they see Blackish, when they see Fresh Off the Boat, and the phrase white people is repeated constantly, which for me fills my heart with so much joy after years of being talked about, to be able to be like, here's the other side that you didn't see, and the impact of racism and how we're dealing with it, and this is how we survive, like just to give you a little glimpse of that. I think to me it's incredibly refreshing, it's incredibly powerful, but at the same time, when you're not used to that, I mean, of course it's going to shock you, and it's kind of embarrassing it took this long. Like, one thing with Paul Mooney uses the phrase white people, he uses a lot of phrases a lot, but certainly that is not a thing that makes people comfortable. And I think, after all these years, you're finally seeing that on television. I think the easy thing to say, it's hacky to make fun of white people. It's like, white people don't get made fun of all that much, really. And the only reason these shows are on, again, I would say it's still a capitalist project. It's not because of the sake of diversity. Apparently making fun of white people is making some money now for white people. And so I will say that. Before we go, because I know the cameras are on, if anybody in New York has tickets to Hamilton, for me and my fiance Bell Hooks, we very much appreciate something in early May if possible.
So once again, we thank all of you. If you have something you want signed, we will do signature only, unless we feel moved to do more. So here we are. Thank you again, St. Norbert's. See you tomorrow night.
All right. For book signing, up against the that side of the theater, and books are for sale outside. Come and join us for the rest of the Bell Hooks residency events tomorrow night with Parker Palmer. Thanks.